Welcome to this forum for general election candidates for Tacoma City Council at-large position 8. Council Districts 1 and 3 and at-large positions 7 and 8 are up for election this year. All are 4-year terms. The at-large positions are voted for and represent all the citizens of Tacoma. The candidates are, in ballot order, Kristina Walker and John O'Loughlin. Welcome. Thank you for being here. The timekeeper is Susan Eidenschink, and she will enforce the timing rules so that each candidate is given the same amount of time to answer all of the same questions. The questions will be asked by and have been prepared by members of the Community and Neighborhood Councils of Tacoma and the League of Women Voters of Tacoma-Pierce County. Each candidate now gets up to 1 minute for an opening statement, and we begin with Kristina Walker.
Great, thank you. So I'm Kristina Walker, running for Tacoma City Council, position number 8. I'm currently the executive director at Downtown on the Go. We are a nonprofit that works on multimodal transportation focused on downtown, but connections throughout the city. So I will certainly bring my transportation expertise to the council. Also very committed to working on affordable housing and addressing homelessness. I'm married to a teacher. I have 2 young kids, so very committed to working with our Tacoma Public Schools and supporting our education system, including access to schools and all training programs. I'm also really committed to working on making sure we've got good living wage jobs here in Tacoma, and I think that growing our economy does not need to be at odds with the environment. We can do both of those things together. Honored to be here, looking forward to the questions. Thanks so much for having me, and looking forward to today.
Thank you. John O'Loughlin.
Thank you, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak with you all and those of you watching it on TV. My name is John O'Loughlin. I'm a candidate for Tacoma City Council, position 8, and I'm running for City Council because I love Tacoma. I'm a lifelong resident, born and raised, worked my entire career here, and I love Tacoma. It has my daughter, has my granddaughter, it has my siblings, and lots of friends. But loving Tacoma isn't enough to be a good city council member, and I have the experience necessary to be a very successful city council member. I worked for 31 years at the city, coming into the city at an entry-level position at the treatment plant washing bottles, and retired as the assistant director of environmental services. And through that period, I put a study on the way the city operates from all those different levels, and I think I can use that experience and my knowledge of the budget to make a difference as a city council member. And thank you.
Thank you. So we move on to questions. The questions will be asked by Doug Schaefer and Liz Burris of Community Council of Tacoma. And if I don't specify otherwise, you will have 60 seconds to answer. The order of answering will rotate with each question, and therefore John O'Loughlin will answer the first question first, and Doug Schaefer will ask the question.
What is the greatest issue facing the city of Tacoma that the city council can address? How should the council address it? And what will you do personally if elected?
So it's clear to me from the thousands and thousands of doors I've knocked on that the citizens believe homelessness is the biggest issue facing Tacoma, and I agree. And what I'm going to do is bring leadership to the city council. There were initiatives on the books back in 2010 out of a study on affordable housing that if we had implemented then, we'd be in a better position now with homelessness, because the solution to homelessness is making sure that we keep people in affordable housing. There's another issue that I want to work on immediately that deals with the requirements that are put in front of faith-based organizations that might want to have tent cities. We accept all sorts of risk with having homeless people on the streets and no sewer service or sanitary services. But if we put them in a faith-based organization's tent city, the requirements raise to a 0 risk tolerance, and that's just not functional or productive.
Thank you. Kristina Walker.
So I would take that just a step further and say affordable housing and homelessness, because I don't think that we can be talking about homelessness by itself. I think we need to have the conversation together. So making sure that we are solving the immediate problem is that we have folks living in homelessness right now. So we need more beds, we need more services to support those people. In addition, we need to be building more housing. We need to be making sure that we're doing everything we can to address housing affordability at all levels in all neighborhoods to make sure that every Tacoman has access to a place to live.
Thank you. Liz Burris will ask the next question, and Kristina Walker will answer it first.
Good afternoon. What should the City Council do to promote family wage jobs within the city?
Great, thank you for that question. I think this is so important and is also tied to our issues of affordable housing and homelessness. Promoting family wage jobs is about growing the jobs and the businesses that we have here in Tacoma, make sure we're supporting those businesses. We have a lot of great programs. We were just talking earlier about our SpaceWorks program that really empowers the folks that are here in Tacoma to grow their business, addresses barriers to making that happen. So supporting the businesses that are here now to grow them. And then as we're recruiting businesses, to be thoughtful and deliberate and intentional about what businesses we are attracting to Tacoma, how we're growing in our economy, to make sure that we're insisting on family wage jobs, because we know when people are successful, then our entire economy is successful.
Thank you. Mr. McLaughlin.
So what I've been doing is going around talking to as many existing business owners as will spend the time with me and asking them the simple question, what are the obstacles between you and hiring more living wage jobs here in Tacoma? And patterns are emerging. And one of them is a customer service attitude or approach from the city of Tacoma. The city, I've worked there for 31 years. I know it can be very complicated, and certain functions are put in different areas that aren't obvious to the outsider. So I think we need to, with leadership from the City Council, develop that customer service approach so that when someone comes in and needs a permit or needs some approval from the City of Tacoma, there's someone there to help them through that process so that they can get to that business expansion and hire more people. And that's a critical step here in Tacoma.
Thank you. Next question will come from Doug Schaefer, and John O'Loughlin will answer it first.
Should the city of Tacoma be following the lead of some other municipalities and impose taxes on sales of guns and ammunition? And if so, how should the funds be used? And if not, why not?
So, that question comes up a lot, and I don't think Tacoma needs to follow anybody. I think Tacoma is a leader. And so Tacoma has a rich history of making bold decisions that no other communities did. And I'm not against following good ideas that come up other places, but I think that concept of following is not necessarily a good one. And specifically to the tax on guns and ammos, I think that would potentially be a distraction, that the debate on that, it wouldn't intend to generate much in the terms of outcomes in reducing the amount of guns or bullets in Tacoma, because there's so many available so many other places. And so I want to focus on the outcomes that are behind that, which is reducing gun violence. And there's lots of programs that we could spend the public's time and the city council's time debating that would be more likely to produce the outcomes that we're trying to get to than that.
Kristina Walker.
So gun violence is a public health crisis, and we need to do everything we can to address that. As the wife of a teacher and a parent of 2 kids, I am absolutely in support of anything that's going to help reduce the amount of gun violence in our community. And we should be putting money that we have towards programs with our youth. I think the best way to get at the problem is to address the youth and make sure that I think there's a number of good programs like the RAIN program that are supporting youth in anti-gang measures. And I think that this is one way to pay for it. And so I am supportive of it. The city does not have a ton of options as far as policy measures to take against gun violence. And so I think we should use every option that we have to do work to combat gun violence.
Thank you. Liz Burris, please direct your next question to Kristina Walker first.
How have you participated in the city's land use planning, including its comprehensive plan and its sub-area planning for the Hilltop, the Mall, and the Tide Flats? And are you satisfied with the city's planning process?
Thank you for that question. And I think that that's a multifaceted answer. I have been in my day job very involved in some sub-area planning over the years. And I believe the first one that I participated in the South Downtown area is now already 6 years old. And so I think that that was a good process when we went through it. It's probably already time to revisit that. So I think those sub-area plans are really important and they're a great tool. The Tide Flats sub-area plan is something that I think is vitally important to the future of our city. I'm very excited to roll up my sleeves and work on that. And I also am very optimistic that everyone's at the table for that now that the tribe, the county, City of Fife, City of Tacoma are all at the table, and the Port of Tacoma, excuse me, are all at the table for that process. I think sub-area plans in general are really important tools for neighborhoods and groups and neighborhood areas to do the work of planning in a specific area. So I'm excited to roll up my sleeves.
Thank you. John O'Loughlin.
So my work on previous planning efforts comes mainly through my role with the Environmental Services Department. And in that vein, there were infrastructure parts of the comprehensive plan, as well as the trees and some other environmental parts. And so I've been a part of that planning from a management perspective for decades. And then specifically, I think my experience on the Foss Waterway cleanup as the project engineer and coming to workable solutions that get us to the environmental outcomes that we must achieve, but respect the need for businesses to continue to operate down there. I think I've demonstrated over years the ability to balance those two things to make sure that they aren't mutually exclusive and that all the businesses down there want a clean environment so long as they can continue to operate.
Thank you. Doug Schaefer, John O'Loughlin will answer first.
Thank you. Residential rents are increasing dramatically. What should the city do to address the need for affordable housing?
So very quickly, full disclosure, I am a residential real estate landlord. I have a home that I rent out. But the thing that Tacoma needs to do is get after implementing the 2018 Affordable Housing Action Strategy. There are numerous things in there that are critical, and unfortunately, they're very much the same policy recommendations as were present in the 2010 version of that study. And so we need to make progress. I have a specific proposal that I think the city of Tacoma should dedicate 1% of its general fund, that'd be about $2.4 million, to seed the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and other programs related to homelessness. Rather than, it's not that I'm against the tax that's recommended in those two reports, but I know that generating that tax will be a long, arduous process, and we can dedicate that 1% of the general fund the day I come into office. And so, and it can be paid for by efficiencies in the other 99% of the budget. And so I think that would be one specific thing I would pursue.
Thank you. Kristina Walker.
So you're absolutely right. Residential rents are rising, taxes are rising. People across the city are feeling the pinch of a very hot housing market. So we absolutely need to be digging into that affordable housing action strategy. I know some pieces have been put in place, and I want to continue those, continue to work with my colleagues, future colleagues on the council, and also with all the local nonprofits and that are doing great work when it comes to affordable housing. Tacoma Housing Authority is a great resource, and they're leveraging funds all the time to build great spaces. So building housing at all levels, making sure we're intentional about adding affordable housing, and then making it easy to build other housing as well, so that we are just increasing the amount of housing stock in this community. I think there's a couple other things we can do as far as tenant rights to make sure we're supporting renters in this community, and then being really in communication with both the landlords and the tenants throughout the process.
Thank you. And you'll answer the next question first, and it will come from Liz Burris.
Residents are concerned about perceived increases in both violent crime and property crime. Are you satisfied with the current level of service of our police department, which incidentally has not kept up with population growth? With that in mind, what, if any, changes would you support?
So I am hearing across the city that people want more police presence in their neighborhoods, and that they are feeling that increase of violent crime and property crime, as you asked. I do know that the numbers don't match with the population growth. So we do need to invest in our law enforcement, and we also need to invest in the conversations between the community and law enforcement. And I'm very encouraged by the work that the mayor has been doing around Project Peace and continuing that work, because I think those conversations between our communities and law enforcement are vitally important, not only in keeping people safe, but making sure people feel safe in their homes and on the streets, and anything they do in Tacoma. So that is a really important part of that as we do add funding to our local police.
Thank you. John O'Loughlin.
So as I'm knocking on doors and talking to the citizens, the response that they get from the police department comes up regularly. And I do recognize that the police department has been challenged to fill all the vacancies that they have, and so there's a certain amount of customer service that suffers when they don't have the staffing available to respond. I'm open to conversations with the police department and the union to troubleshoot some of those things. There might be opportunities to move some of the lower level response issues to individuals that don't have to be carrying a badge. There might be some more customer service sorts of positions that would be available that wouldn't be as challenging to fill as a police officer with as much process involved. But it's something that the citizens perceive as a real problem, and that when they call the police department, they'd really like someone from the police department to respond. And, being a practical person, I understand that that's a challenge for the police department because of staffing levels.
Thank you. And John O'Loughlin, your question will come from Doug.
What is your understanding of the property tax abatement available to developers of multifamily residential projects, and should it continue in its present form?
So there's an 8 and a 12 year, and there are some adjustments that are available to the city to make those things attractive to the private sector. So we can adjust the size of the project that is eligible, the percentage of the area median income that qualifies for affordable housing under that, as well as a few others. And right now, we do not have those parameters set to the point where it attracts enough response from the private sector. And so we need to immediately adjust those so that we get the private sector taking advantage of the 12-year, which involves producing affordable housing, and not just the 8-year, which is the one that's available to them without having to produce affordable housing. So I'm a firm believer that the city needs to get affordable housing out of those tax abatements, and right now we're not getting as much as we need to, so we need to get in and adjust those parameters so that it creates an attraction for the private sector to build affordable housing for us.
Kristina Walker.
I think that, like anything, we need to revisit things on a regular basis, and the housing market is very hot right now, and so looking at these tax abatements and, as my colleague said, the 8-year, the 12-year, even potentially looking into a 15-year, I look forward to readdressing those, making sure that they work both for developers and for our need for affordable housing. And I think the real key there is that we are in conversation with both the Tacoma Housing Authority and the for-profit development community as we make those, to make sure that they are incentives that make sense, that work, but get us what we want. Again, we're in a hot housing market. We should be really intentional about what we want in our community.
Thank you. The next question will come from Liz Burris, and Kristina Walker will answer first.
What should the city do to address climate change? And what should the city be doing to prepare for the impacts of climate change?
We need to be incorporating climate change into all of our decision-making processes. I work in transportation, and so much of the work we do is moving people away from single occupancy vehicles, which does have a positive impact on our climate. And so continuing that work, continuing to have options. And then at a basic level, we've got places in Tacoma, like Ruston Way, that are predicted to be underwater. So we need to be looking at what those contingency plans are and how we are planning for the coming change. We need to continue to invest in our environmental programs. I know the city has a great environmental action plan, and so implementing that and being really serious and meeting the goals within that plan right now.
Thank you. John O'Loughlin.
So based on my experience working in the Environmental Services Department, I think green infrastructure is one thing that we need to focus on initially and immediately. That allows us to deal with some of the more intense rainfall that causes flooding. Those impacts are already upon us, and we need to respond to those quickly. There are much larger impacts coming down the road with sea level rise at the treatment plant. You know, a several billion-dollar asset that is at risk because of that. And so we need to strategically look at those assets and make sure we're planning. Every time we spend $1 on it, we should be considering the impact of climate change. And finally, I think because so much of our climate impact comes from transportation, I rode my bike to work for 31 years, and I got hit twice because there's just not enough bike lanes. And so I think making sure that we're focused on the things that will help our transportation that nobody else is going to be able to do for us. Safe routes to school, bike lanes, those sorts of things.
Thank you. This will be the last question. John O'Loughlin will answer it first, and the question will be asked by Doug Schaefer.
What do you know about, and are you satisfied with, the current expansion plans of Sound Transit and Pierce Transit? And what other forms of transportation should the city promote?
So I'm aware of the Link Light Rail extension that's going on right now, and that costs a lot of money, and it's a fixed track, and it will service a very defined area. I think while the city is not Pierce Transit and does not direct Pierce Transit, the city needs to work with Pierce Transit to reestablish bus routes that were lost several years ago. We still haven't reestablished the level of service that we had before the big economic downturn. And that's the most flexible, practical solution to the problem of moving people from where they live to where they work and back. I think light rail has a role in that. I don't know that I would have it in the order that it's being done right now. I think it would make more sense to really focus on bus transportation so that we get people who can't afford a car to a place where they can work and then get them home in a reasonable manner.
Thank you. Kristina Walker.
I'm a transit advocate, both professionally and personally, so I'm going to fight for transit for this city at all levels, and that includes regional transit, so the Sound Transit Link expansion and the Tacoma Dome Link extension. We need and deserve beautiful transit in this community, and regional transit doesn't work unless we have local transit. So we do have great expansion, great investment happening here with Sound Transit. We need to make those investments as a community in Pierce Transit, and there currently are not expansion plans at Pierce Transit, but I would certainly advocate. There are parts of our city that are not reached with transit service, and that's just not acceptable. So I will be a big advocate for that, for working with our transit system. And then I also want to make sure that as we are investing and as we're building and as there's construction, that we are very sensitive to the needs of the current residents and businesses along the route. I know particularly with the Sound Transit Link expansion, the businesses are being hit hard there. And so we at Downtown on the Go are really focused on supporting those businesses on a daily basis to make sure that they get to see the benefits of light rail in our community.
Thank you. Thank you for answering all our questions. Now you each have up to 1 minute for a closing statement. And reversing our opening order, John O'Loughlin will make the first statement.
Thank you all for this opportunity. It's a great chance to reach out to several voters. I'm running for city council because I love Tacoma, and I think I also have the experience necessary, and I hope maybe some of the answers to the questions help demonstrate my can-do approach and my action-oriented approach to things. I think the city policy is critical and important, and that's the focus of the city council, but it's only valuable to the extent it produces the outcomes that we need. And so that's what I'm going to focus on, is spending time talking to the community, understanding how is the actions of the city, how is that being received by you, how is that working for you, so that feedback loop is constantly available and we continually improve our service delivery until we're to the point where the citizens are getting the value for the money that they expect.
Thank you. Kristina Walker.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity. I am Kristina Walker, running for Tacoma City Council position number 8. I'm a collaborator and a bridge builder. I've spent the last 8 years leading my nonprofit organization to make sure this city is easy to get around and that it's livable and a place where people want to live, work, and play. I'll bring a fresh perspective to the City Council as a working mom, and I'm very proud to have the endorsement of Mayor Woodard's and much of the City Council, many of our local elected officials, and great community organizations, a number of our working people and their unions, and really look forward to continuing the conversation throughout the campaign and on the council. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you to the candidates, John O'Loughlin and Kristina Walker, for being here and answering our questions and helping to ensure that your vote is an educated one. Now don't forget to use it. Kristina Walker and John O'Loughlin are candidates for City of Tacoma Council at Large position 8. I thank them. I also want to thank our questioners from the Community Council of Tacoma, the volunteers from the League of Women Voters of Tacoma-Pierce County, and the wonderful crew from TV Tacoma. Election Day is November 5th. If you're mailing your ballot, the post office recommends that you send it in early. If you're using a drop box, you have until 8 p.m. on the 5th of November to get it in. Thank you for being here or watching and making your vote count.